Alrighty, so this morning I want to ask you guys a question, and it's a question that you're probably going to get sick and tired of, and you're probably going to say by the end of this, yes, to the answer to the question, because you're going to have sat through this sermon and said, yes, I will suffer for His name, because the question I'm asking this morning is, will we suffer for His name?
Yes.
Something that's going to be, there's a theme that I think runs through this, and really that we're going to see, but I think before we get to that question, is because there's an idea that I think that suffering, we have preconceived ideas of what suffering is. We kind of have an idea of what we think suffering is, and oftentimes that's a poor perception. And that our idea of suffering isn't exactly maybe how we should view it. Maybe your idea of suffering would be cat food. Some examples of all the things that we deal with as college students, specifically, and just in general as humans. Specifically here in America, that looking through the American lens, that we've really had some ideas that have, kind of shifted our idea of suffering. And really, when we look at life, we're like, we complain about this, we complain about that, and, it can be cat food, it could be homework, it could be, a common one that I hear often is waking up early. The fact that I have to get up, I can't believe I have to get up at this hour. Just the fact that we're impatient for our food, we're impatient for what we want, when we want it, and just problems with computers, whatever it might be, that gets us, it can either get us really angry, really frustrated, really upset, whatever it is, and there's such little things. But really that's our idea, that sometimes that's obviously a little bit to the extreme of maybe we wouldn't all say that that's suffering, but many times I think we act like that. We say, I can't believe this is happening to me, I can't believe I had to deal with this, it's just, it may be a little bit over the top, but really when our emotions get us to the point, whatever it might be. Which one are you guys laughing at? Excellent, well that's good. Because I was laughing in the library out loud while I was looking them up and putting them in there. And even within our world today, that we might be on that flip side, is that we look at the problems that are going on in Haiti, and we might say, well that's the kind of suffering that I have to endure. That maybe going without food, not being clothed, there's actually, some of the stuff that's going on down there is the fact that they actually have to go from poor towns, and then they're actually going to still poor towns, but those, just because the level and the social, status of the different towns, that they're actually traveling from one poor town to the next, because this one is less poor than the other. That they're traveling sometimes 4 miles for water, and that can still kind of shift our idea and think, well, if I'm not suffering like that, then that's not real suffering. And obviously, I don't want to minimize any suffering that's going on, even within your guys' lives today. That obviously there's still things in America that people are really suffering, that there's real grief, that there's real sorrow, that there's big problems, and so I don't want to minimize that by any means. But really, that around the world, if we take a look at the scope of suffering, that it's said that possibly, currently right now, that there's 200 million Christians in 60 countries that are all facing problems where their fundamental human rights are being denied. 200 million. And then also within the past year, 2008 to 2009, there was 600,000 martyrs for the name of Christ. And so it's just that idea, will we suffer for His name? And it may be that we think that we have to do one or the other, or that our ideas of what suffering is may not be what God calls us to, or may not be what we have to face. But we all face pain. We all face things that are difficult in our lives. Yeah. The question is, will we suffer for His name? So I'm going to go ahead and look and just read Philippians. Philippians 1, 27 through 30, if you guys want to turn there. And we'll go ahead and look at it together. And we'll kind of walk through it afterwards. So it says, whatever happens, conduct yourselves in a manner worthy of the gospel of Christ. Then whether I come and see you or only hear about you in my absence, I will know that you stand firm in one spirit, contending as one man for the faith of the gospel, without being frightened in any way by those who oppose you. This is a sign to them that they will be destroyed, but that you will be saved, and that by God. For it has been granted to you on behalf of Christ, not only to believe on Him, but also to suffer for Him, since you are going through the same struggle that you saw that I had, and now hear that I still have. And so obviously, maybe you've been able to gain a little bit of perspective about what's going on here. That Paul's writing this letter, he's writing to a church that he has a very established relationship with, that he's in prison, and that they've watched the certain things that he's been through. And maybe even some of the circumstances when he was in Philippi, the people that were opposing him, and some of the things that he had to go up against, the conflict that he had, that they've seen that. They've seen some of the struggles that he's had. And so that's kind of that perspective that, this is where Paul's at, this is where he's writing from. But he says, he begins, and in some translations it actually says, here it says, conduct yourselves in a manner worthy of the gospel. In some translations he says, the one thing. This is the one thing that I want you to focus on. The one thing that matters is the fact that you conduct yourselves in a manner worthy. And really, in looking at that, is that it says, regardless of the circumstances. And kind of trying to understand this, is it's not dependent on the circumstances of how we act. Because I know for me, a lot of times I react to circumstances. I react to people. And he's not saying react to that, but he's saying react to the gospel. React to what has happened in your life. React to what is happening and continuing to happen in your life. And that should be, if that's prominent in your life, that's what you're reacting to. That should be what you're responding to. So regardless of the circumstances. But really in that idea and that language of the manner worthy, I guess really in the Greek, that there's an idea that citizens, he's talking about citizens of heaven almost in a sense. That there's an idea of citizenship because this was a Roman colony, and so people can identify with that. One thing that kind of came to my mind is that it's almost like this idea of he's recognizing, like, you guys are living in the city, you have all these rights, these freedoms, these responsibilities, and don't just sit and don't just take them for granted, but like, look at the width and the breadth of everything that you have offered to you. And so he's kind of in a sense saying that as you guys are identifying with what's going on in your daily lives and where you live and everything, all the roles that you can have, is that there's also this idea that the gospel is wider than that, or to make sure that it's not minimized, that there's a farther depth that it goes. And really a goofy illustration I was thinking of is that, we all can identify with the fact that we maybe in debt to a bank, or somehow we do some banking on a daily level or a weekly level or whatever it is, that we all are in transaction or in business with a bank. And so my thought was that I have a debit card, and for every transaction that I have, that if it's below, if it's $2.17 and the purchase, or I guess if my purchase was $2.17, and then anything above that reaches to $3, I get back in my account if it's just $2.17. And so if I make that account, so that's an opportunity that I have, that I get back that 83 cents. So that's something that even though I didn't pay for that next level, the dollar amount up to $3, that there's 83 cents that I get back in my account whenever I use my debit card. And so it's in that sense of just saying, this is available to you, this is something, there's a fullness here. And for me, I wouldn't want to go without that. I want my 83 cents. For everything that I purchase, something that comes down to it, I want that extra 17 cents, that extra 25 cents, whatever it is. And so in this, Paul's actually saying that not only was it granted to you to believe on Jesus, but the fact that it was also granted to you for suffering. And the Greek word that's used here is actually charisma. I believe I'm pronouncing that right. And it's this idea of grace, this idea of a gift, that's something actually given. And obviously, when we respond, we have something, when we get a gift, there's this expectation or this anticipation, whether we know what it is or not, once we receive it, that we're excited about it, that we actually have good emotions about it, that it's a gift. And so it's this idea that Paul's actually really speaking to these people and saying suffering in itself, oh bless you, whatever form it might take, including sneezes, that it's a gift. The pain is a gift. There's something, and not just for the sake of it, not just to beat ourselves up or to have to go through pain, or just no pain, no gain, so I'm just going to suffer, and the more that I suffer, the better this is going to be. But the idea that whatever pain that we experience, that if it's for the sake of Christ, and it's the pain that He allows, that it can be something of worth, something that we can actually be excited about. And maybe not the sense of just, oh great, I get to suffer today, I can't wait. But still in the sense of just flipping that and saying, this is something really good, this is something that I can accept because of Christ, and He has a purpose in it. And so, in speaking about suffering, is really that it's all pain that you meet and that you might endure. So it may not just be the idea but of martyrs, or the fact that maybe we would die for Christ, but just any pain. And so actually the Greek word for witness, or for martyr, is actually from the Greek word for witness. And so it's just that idea of that it's that identified with it, that if you're going to identify with something, just in saying hey, I know Josh, there's the sense that I can say that, but if I don't go through life with him, if I don't go through the experiences that he goes through with, then I'm not really identifying on a deeper level, then I'm not really a witness to his life, then I'm not really experiencing the things